Would you like to live your best life possible, regardless of your imperfections? Discover cutting-edge tools and inspiration to let go of your limitations and expand your life beyond what you've ever imagined. On Imperfect Brilliance, we help you tap into your unique gifts and talents, uncovering and letting your brilliance shine. Join certified facilitator and coach Betsy McLaughlin as she delves into different areas of your life to get unstuck and create the life that is truly possible for you. Betsy has changed her life by utilizing the tools and techniques she is sharing with you. What if your willingness to acknowledge your brilliance is the catalyst to creating a new reality? When you stop judging you, what else can you create in your life and in the world? Join Betsy live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern to create magical and joyous possibilities for an hour of laughs, questions, tips, and more. We are excited to contribute and play with you.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on when you're listening to this show or where you are in the world. Hi, everybody. I'm Betsy McLaughlin, and so happy that you're here listening in to Imperfect Brilliance. I have had this radio show for several years now. I first started the show on a different network with Sadie Rose Lake, and then Sadie and I joined with Kathy Williams, and then Sadie decided to go off and do some other things, and then it was Kathy and I for, probably a couple of years. And then Kathy decided to have her own radio show, also on OMTimes Radio. So it is now me, and I'm so glad you guys have listened and played with us. And as always, you're more than welcome to call in while the show, if you're calling in live Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And that phone number is area code 202-570-7057. Or if you're listening later, and you can always email me at accessbetsy@gmail.com and let me know of questions or topics that, or people that you would like to have me interview on the show. As you guys, I wouldn't be here without you. And I really appreciate, hearing from everybody. It's really fun. And, Trina is my guest today, Trina Rice, and welcome, Miss Trina.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And, it's just so cool. And you never know, I'll be somewhere and people will say, oh, my gosh, I listen to your show all the time. And it's really fun to hear because, especially in radio, you don't see anybody in front of you. So you just kind of never know. And there's all kinds of archives on OMTimesRadio.com, or you can also find it through iTunes and just search for Imperfect Brilliance. So all kinds of amazing topics, amazing guests are in those archives. So today's show is all about talking about engaging with the energetically aware child. And there's so much, and I've had some conversations with different guests around the energy of words and creating and engaging and receiving beyond the words. And Trina, today, she brings with her over 22 years of experience as an occupational therapist. She works with kids of all ages, including adults and families of all kinds. And I know some of the stories of kids that Trina has worked with, and she's got a great connection with children, and especially those who have special abilities. And Trina has the capacity to create a space of no judgment and allowing what may have been thought as a wrongness to show people and kids and the families that she's working with that it's actually a strongness. And Trina has an amazing ability to look beyond any labels, any limitations, any diagnoses, anywhere that somebody has a label of or definition of disability or anything else, and discover the magic that is hidden by illusions. And I love that last piece, like that hidden by illusions. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and inviting you to listen in for tips and tools to enhance your relationship with not only yourself, but also with everybody that you interact with, and especially with our children. Whether you have a child yourself or you just know children in your life, your nieces or nephews or just kids, neighborhood kids or whomever. I mean, we all interact with kids from one way or another. And so if you've been labeled or diagnosed, or you know somebody who has, I wonder what this conversation today with Trina could actually contribute to maybe some different conversations. So thank you so much for joining us today, Trina. I'm really glad you're here.
I am too. I'm super excited.
And so I wonder, like, even where to start with this conversation. So let's talk a little bit first about some of the labels maybe that kids can, but we're going to probably talk more about children today because that's kind of where you specialize, but, people knowing that you can take what we're talking about and apply it truly to somebody of any age. So how do you even explain what it is you do? Let's start there, Trina.
Well, and what you were saying is, yes, we're all kids and we've all been kids. So these tools are magical to apply across the board. But what I do, well, that's a great question. My background, I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for like close to 25 years. And I work with children that have been diagnosed or labeled with like autism, ADD, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, even like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, all of those different labels. And so throughout that time, besides doing like as an occupational therapist, I've worked with like your daily life skills, like being able to get dressed, get your stuff together, be organized, so you can function in school or function at home, like simple meal prep stuff, but also looking at the sensory component and your ability to be with your body in this environment and to engage and to interact. Because when you work with a lot of like different labels, and kids and adults who are super aware energetically, a lot of times they have a more difficult time interacting and engaging their entire body, being here, being with a body, and being able to be in different environments, like out in a community, out at school, out at home, wherever that may be. So that's kind of what I do as an occupational therapist. And I have taken tools and apply that with what I do so we go beyond like, so people don't get stuck in with a label and they look past that into what their gifts really are, instead of making it something that is not a gift.
Yeah, because I know before I learned a lot about these things, like some of even the points of view that are just kind of out in the general public, and then realizing truly when I started to look at it, how limiting that is, like putting labels on people or having anybody even supposed to be fitting in to a certain box that, as there's like, oh, well, maybe it's actually not the way it first appears to be.
Well, yeah. I mean, and we do that everywhere, and it doesn't mean that a label or a diagnosis has to be a wrong thing or a bad thing, because it can actually be used to assist and, you know, give you information and also give you resources. But we also do it like, I mean, people, you label yourself as like, I am the CEO, or you're a mother, you're a father, you're a daughter. Like we have all of these different labels that we function from. And when we function only as that, like if you would go into your work, your job, and say you're like an administrator, or like a, like the administrator, the CEO, and you do that, and that's the only label you give yourself, then you've just cut yourself off from all these other possibilities. So that's what so when you apply all these tools, it's actually going beyond even having that as a diagnostic label of like autism or ADD, ADHD. It's all of our labels.
Yeah, so really going beyond anything that you've defined yourself, that you have or you don't have, that you are, that you aren't. And I love that. I love that description. Thank you so much, Trina.
Yeah. So like one of the things that I don't know, it seems like I get asked a lot on, because working with like, when I say like the energetically aware child, or us who are adults, or anybody who's energetically aware, there's so many of us that are highly, like a more common term is like highly sensitive. So we pick up on so much stuff, and we don't even realize that it's not ours. And it even occurs at a larger extreme when you're working with and being with somebody with like autism, because they don't have the filters to be able to decipher between what is theirs and not theirs. And so you get a lot of behaviors. And so I get asked a lot as how do you engage? How do you interact with a child energetically? Because I also work a lot with children and adults who don't have communication in the terms of what we would typically say, like conversations. They don't use words. They're nonverbal. So you have to go beyond the words to be able to actually express yourself. But we get so caught up in what we have to use words. But if you really look at it, like, I don't know, what I would say at least 60% of our, 50 to 60% of our communication isn't even words. It's through gestures and facial expressions, and even grunting verbalizations. So that's one thing, but a lot of people don't even acknowledge that.
Wow. Yeah, and I've actually thinking about a couple of other conversations that I've had on the show, and interestingly enough, with the timing, that Sirius was on last week, and we had some conversations a little bit about this as well, and it's really just so amazing when you stop and you look at the energies. Like, you can even receive a text from somebody that you are, like they could be across the world, and you can, or an email, and you can look at that and you can be aware of the energy that is coming through. So it's when you stop and you start looking at things like that, where we really do have so much more awareness. And I think we ever really stop and acknowledge.
Yeah, it's so true, because that is there. It's just like, you get a text and you can, a lot of times, sometimes it can be misinterpreted, but a lot of times you can decipher whether that person is like upset about something or they're happy or whatever. And so many of us communicate we all communicate way more energetically than we actually do through words. So a lot of it is tapping into it. And just as an example, I went to go actually work with one of my clients yesterday who does have autism and is nonverbal. And I walked in and we like looked at each other and he just busted out laughing. And I just looked at him and I just busted out laughing. And we were laughing. I was laughing so hard I was crying. And it was just out of sheer joy of acknowledging each other and who he is and the gifts that he brings to the world. And like, that's, I guess, one of the biggest things that I would say to, like a tool to share would be like, one is acknowledgement, and the other one is like space, like being able to like be a space. And what I mean by space is like actually create this like expansiveness and bring your body into the computation of it, that like you're way more than just your body. And you also include your body, but you like allow yourself. It's just like if you were standing outside and you really were just there and the wind was blowing, and it's your ability to feel like, okay, is that wind? Is that a breeze? Is that a soft whisper, or is the wind gushing? And where is it hitting me on my skin? Like, are my arm hairs blowing up? Like, and it's the awareness of that, and then taking it and getting like, if you really do think of like the wind or the breeze and expanding that out like really, really, really big. There are so many times that we walk around and we're like what I so often call crunchy, because we try to squish ourselves down so small. And when we be that way and we show up that way, like communication is really hard. And then people can't really, it's harder to relate. And one of the things when I'm like working with kids and communicating with them beyond the words, that is one thing, is like if you walk in and somebody's having a really bad day, you know they're having a bad day.
Yes. That's
what we are talking about, is perceiving that energy, right? You can walk into a room and know if somebody had just gotten into an argument or they have a lot going on. And then that person doesn't necessarily, they perceive that, but they don't really know how to respond to it. But when you can create more space around that, that's not to say, yes, we're not going to have our bad days. We go around and we have rough moments. But when you can actually still be with it and expand it out so it's not so like solid, you get a much greater interaction with people. I don't know if I'm helping or explaining anything very well.
Well, to me, you did very, very nicely, actually. And so I really appreciate that. And it's a great tip for no matter where you are or what you're doing. If you have, and I love how you said the crunchy space where you're kind of, you're just like, like, so if you feel your body tensing up like that, that's a great, very easy, very quick way to remind yourself that you are way more than just your physical body, and, that you have awareness of everything around you. So if you can relax into it and expand that space, it truly does give you, so for me, especially when I do that, it gives me so much peace.
Yes, it does. Yeah. It does. And it allows your body to almost relax. Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll allow everybody's body to relax for a couple of minutes while we take a break. And stick with us today listening to Imperfect Brilliance. Betsy McLaughlin and Trina Rice will be back shortly.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at OMTimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Dad, this is fun. I didn't think I liked kayaking.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but I think it's time to head back in.
Okay. Can we come back?
Sure. Hey, be careful getting out of the boat.
It's a kayak, Dad.
I'm going to return the kayak.
Can we walk home?
How about a taxi?
It's a short fare from your neighborhood to your naturehood. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a neighborhood park or green space near you. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the U.S. Forest Service.
Welcome back to Imperfect Brilliance. Today we are talking about labels and energetics and children, and right before the break you were talking about expanding your being out if you're feeling sticky or crunchy, and I would love to talk a little bit more about that. And when you apply that with the kids or the families that you work with, what does that change for them?
It allows, like, a lot of times, well, it changes a lot. But one thing is, like, especially if you do have a diagnosis or label, it's kind of like we were talking about at the beginning. There's so many preconceived notions and judgments and like almost impelled like perspectives that people have about how a person should function because they've been labeled this particular way. So when you're actually willing to be space with that person, you allow that person to show up for who they are, not for the label that they are and with the label that they have. It goes way, that's why I keep talking about beyond the labels, because it goes way beyond that. And allows, like, it's almost like it allows their true self, like who they are at their core, to begin to shine through. And so one of the things that it helps a lot with, like, is behaviors. It decreases behaviors, but that could be like overwhelm. Like even for the normal person, when you are stressed out, overwhelm, anxiety, expanding out, and I call it your zone of awareness. So it's basically, we all have, you know how we all have our personal space?
Yes.
And some people require a lot more personal space than other people. Some people like to be right on top of you and touch and feel you. And then there's also other people who don't necessarily like to be so touched as much. It's like they like touch, but they don't like to have somebody like right there on top of them. So it's getting aware of what your personal space is, and also the awareness of what someone else's personal space is, and expanding it because it's way beyond your personal space. But that's like a zone. And what I've seen, like, over, if you're talking about a child, like, and they go to school and they're at school all day, they have to be able to maintain this particular, like, not a particular, but like a presence of them to be able to interact in the schools. And a lot of times, especially if you're talking with someone who, like, does have autism, it's really challenging because they take on so much and they're aware of so much throughout their day besides what they're trying to address or work on. If they have a particular subject or something that they are working on, they're still aware of all those other sounds and voices and lights and the touch of like the texture of the desk or the carpet on the floor or the screech of the chalk on the chalkboard. So they take all of that in. And when you actually, so what happens, and let me finish that, like what happens, so then a lot of times when they get back or go to a familiar environment or to their safe zone, like home, they fall apart. And you get a lot of behaviors at home. And that's what I hear over and over again, parents saying, well, they do. They say they're great at school and they don't have these behaviors. And then they get home and then all these behaviors, they throw tantrums and they do this. Yeah, right? Mm-hmm. So it's because one thing is because they're trying to, so they hold all of that together throughout the day and their zone of awareness gets squished. And then they come home with that squished. So it's a huge gift to be able to actually be that space for them, because then a lot of all of that stuff that's been like projected or impelled or just like things that they're aware throughout the day begins to melt away. So it helps with overwhelm, anxiety, behaviors, and just the ability to actually show up. Like I've seen kids who like, that's when you can be space, that's when they're like willing to do things and they're who they are and their gifts, like whether that's an artistic ability of like drawing, writing, music, it starts to show up, and that it didn't show up in ways before. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that absolutely. And I wonder what we could be for everybody. What we can contribute to everyone around us. Instead of, because a lot of us will go to, if somebody is having a difficult, what we would term a difficult moment, we can go to wanting to either, like fight against it or, like trying to prove something that we think we know or something like that. And what you just described, like allowing the almost like the decompression time and to not make it a wrongness, like to me that really is such a gift, because I can think of so many situations where I have, like when my son is grown now, but when he was younger, I can even think of situations where I was trying to control the way I thought he should act, or, and that just made it worse so many times, and then he was fighting against what I was trying to get him to do, and it would escalate. And I listen now to, some of the things, and I'm thinking that you were just sharing, I'm thinking, wow, if I had known that there were other possibilities besides the way I learned or what I had seen as raising, children, that, perhaps some of these things would have been easier. So I really appreciate those suggestions. And then,
it also allows for that acknowledgement piece of who you are. Just like it's taking what you hear all like nowadays, we get so busy and we get so caught up in everything that we're doing. But when you actually like are willing to expand that zone and be that space, like it's actually you don't have to take time with it. But one of the other aspects that does assist and creates more like joy and just like more overall happiness in your life is like taking a few moments to breathe, or what you would say, go smell the roses. So like, like I've seen it over and over again where like if you're dealing with children, like there's a battle to get out the door to go somewhere. You have to be somewhere. And what if you actually just took a few minutes and hung out? Like if they were, as an example, playing with Legos or playing with their cars or whatever they might be doing, and you actually engaged with them and took a few minutes and sat down and completed like a Lego with them, or a puzzle, or coloring, or I don't know, maybe they're playing a video game. And even if it's for 5 minutes, you engage in their world, then you can say, hey, in such and such time, we have to leave. This is where we have to go. This is what we're going to do. You're gonna reduce so much time that it takes, that you won't have to go through that tantruming. And people say, well, I don't have time to do that. Well, do you have time not to?
That's such a good point. Because it takes so much longer, right? If you, right, to work with whether, depending on the age of the child, if you're trying to get them dressed or out the door and they're fighting you and you're fighting them, versus, taking the time to slow down. And that's such a great point for everything that we're doing in our lives, of taking a few moments and slowing down and what is really required here. And so the contribution to your child, to have them feel like they're connected to you, is something it's just so beautiful. And I wonder, like, what else could parents, teachers, friends who have kids, for all of us, what can we do? What are some other ways that we can engage with children and have them feel like they're, that we know they're there and that we value them? So what other tips can you give everybody?
Several, but one is ask a question. So many times nobody takes the time to ask a child a question because they're told what to do and they're told to get it right. Like even in school, you're told to get it right, but you never ask that child what their preference might be. I mean, yes, sometimes, but so one thing that I have gotten so much information from is asking any particular situation. I ask the question, what do you know, to a child? And I'm like, what do you know about that? And they'll spout out something. And then I'll say, so what else do you know about that? And I have gotten so much information from them. I've had parents be like, how did you get that information from them? Because they went and talked to, like, even parents who've had kids, like, in counseling, and they're like, they don't even tell their counselors that. I'm like, well, when you're willing to actually show up and be that space we just talked about, and then you ask questions without having a lot of preconceived notions of what the answer should be, and you allow a kid to express themselves, you'd be surprised what shows up. And I've had so many kids tell me things over the time, and even those that I'm talking about where it is engaging with that energetic awareness, because I also work, like I said, with the kids that don't have words. But even then I ask them, what do they know about a situation? And one way or another, there's some form of expression that occurs that gives you information where they feel like then they're acknowledged, and it shifts the entire situation. I've had it. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for people of all ages to feel acknowledged and to feel heard is so amazing. And when you feel heard, it's not that you have to have somebody agree with everything you're saying. Being that you are being acknowledged is, yes, I think, such an amazing communication tool to have for people of all ages.
Yeah. So, like, asking questions, I'll ask, what do you know? Or if they're talking, then I'll be like, okay, and what else? And then, or if you're like in some kind of a, breakdown or upset, and it doesn't even have to be that, you can just be asking questions. What are you aware of? in any given situation, because it allows them to express for them, and you're asking, and you're basically empowering your child. You're empowering whoever you're talking to by asking them those questions. And you, on the other hand, the person who's asking the questions, you get all that information, which it also empowers you, because then you get that information to be like, oh, okay. It could change. You change the situations. Like, and then I also ask, well, who are you being? Like, if there is like a situation, like I actually was just talking to my sister, and she has a 2-year-old, and this kid is like nonstop, and he's brilliant, and he will not play with toys. He's got to have real tools, real things. But if he doesn't get like something his way, then a lot of times he is throwing a tantrum. And so I just talked to her about, being that space for him, and then asking him, like, in a moment of time where he is throwing a tantrum, or if somebody is having a meltdown or a breakdown, asking, who are you being? And that doesn't mean like, who are you being? Like coming at them and making them wrong. It's actually like, who are you being? And when you ask that question, it gets them to be like, shifts the energy. So I'll be like, who are you being? I'll ask the question, and I just give space. And then I may follow up by saying, if you were being you right now, who would you be? And I've had kids who are actually throwing tantrums, throwing furniture at school, pulling on people, on the floor, banging their head. And I'll be like, who are you being? And they will continue, but then they stop, and they just kind of stop for a minute, and they may go back to what they're doing, and I give them space. I may ask them again, and then I'll be like, if you were being you, who would you be? And every situation is a little bit different, but I've had a girl like she had a substitute teacher for the day, and she was throwing chairs across the room and on the floor screaming. And that's what I went up to her and I said to her, and she got quiet, and then she started screaming again. And then I'm like, okay, if you were being you, who would you be? And I walked away. I did not engage with her. I did not say anything more. I walked away. I let her finish what she was doing, and she stopped. And she came up to me later, and she's like, I'm sorry. She goes, not me. Oh. And it changed she, because she had limited speech, but it changed for the whole day just by asking that question.
Wow. Stay tuned, you guys, for some more amazing stories with Trina Rice today. We'll be back.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
I adopted Bento in 2010 from a shelter. This cat makes me make art. He's always motivating me to draw pictures of him. He just is motivating artistically. He's my best friend, but a lot of people know him as Keyboard Cat.
Keyboard Cat, YouTube star and shelter pet. Amazing adoption stories start in shelters. Start yours today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, you guys. I'm here with Trina Rice today, and I invite you all to, if you're interested in getting some more information, Trina, could you let everybody know how they could find you?
Yes, you can find me on my website at trinarice.com, and then I'm also on Facebook, Trina Rice. I'm also across different social medias, and my company name is also Harmony Therapeutics, LLC, and I have a Facebook page for that as well. But trinarice.com is the best way, and you can email me at trina@trinarice.com.
Nice and easy.
It is.
And, speaking of nice and easy, it's what some of the tips that you've shared with us are actually easy. They are. Right? They're not complicated, long, drawn-out procedures that or 25 steps that you have to take to change something that might be going on with anybody, child or even an adult. So some of these tools and questions and tips that you're giving us really can be applied to every area of your life. And that's one of the things that I love. Trina is also a certified facilitator with Access Consciousness, and we use these questions and tools in our everyday lives, no matter what we're doing. I can't say I use them 24/7 because there are some times when I forget or I, slip into some old behaviors. But boy, oh boy, I'm so grateful to have these at my, in my tool bag of tricks so that I have different things that I can do to literally change anything that's going on in my life. So I am just so loving this conversation today and how we can apply what you're talking about truly to all areas of our lives. And one of the things I did want to ask you a question about, you had talked a little bit earlier about awareness that some people have heightened awarenesses and then don't know, first of all, maybe that they even have it. And second of all, if, what in the world do you do with it? So I know that there are certain situations, and again, I'm so grateful for having these conversations. Before, I didn't know that this was even something that I had a capacity for. So there would be sometimes in certain situations, like if I was around a lot of people or in a city where there's, a dense amount of population, where sometimes I would feel almost like the walls are closing in and not knowing what to do at that point in time and not realizing that I was just getting so much information and I didn't know what to do with it. So this conversation today about that whole expanding out, and then I was talking to somebody the other day who was in a situation where she started to feel the walls closing in on her. And she was just like, I got to go. I got to get out of this situation, right? So if anybody listening, what could you advise for them when you feel like the walls are kind of closing in, or you just have that feeling of overwhelm, or you don't know what to do with all the information that is rushing in at you?
Well, that once again is expand out, be the space, but a lot of it is we are so aware. We are like these little radio towers, kind of like we all have the cell towers everywhere, and how they're picking up all those energies and vibrations, and that's how we actually communicate. Well, think about all that energy that's running from cell tower to cell tower, all around giving the world, that allows us to get on the internet, that allows us to talk on the phone. that is basically how aware you are of everybody else's and what's going on in everyone else's world, like all their thoughts and their emotions, and what they may be feeling or not feeling. So when you have all that going on, and when you feel like the world is closing in, is it actually yours? Or are you completely just aware? Are you aware of everything and everyone around you? And when you claim it as yours, like when you feel it, that's when you own it. And then you've like solidified it versus being like the first thing would be like, okay, all of this information is flooding into me. What am I aware of here? Is this actually mine? And a lot of times when you can't change something right away, like even like expanding out and being in that space, like expanding your zone, and you still feel like maybe the walls are closing in a little bit, it's usually because it's not yours. And we keep trying to change it, and you can't change it because it's not yours. So one thing you can do is you can just say, I return it to wherever it came from, and I let it go. And that, returning it to sender, and that helps, and you have to do it a few times. And one other thing that I have done a lot of for like kids is like I'll be like, okay, let's act like this. We have a balloon, and we're gonna blow up this imaginary balloon. We're gonna blow it up, and we're gonna put all of that stuff that you're feeling, like all that crunchiness, all the walls closing in, like everything you are upset about, we're going to put it into the balloon. And then on the count of 3, we're going to pop it. And then I actually have them take their hands and pop it. And it's really, for a younger child, it really works. It's amazing that they can actually just like let that stuff go. But it's the same thing as us as adults. Like if you're willing to look at it that way, of like, wow, all of this stuff, I'm like total overwhelmed. I feel like I'm like swimming in a pile of muck. Then you can actually be like, is this mine? And let it go. Return it to wherever it came from. And you don't have to figure out where it came from. Right. Because you don't really know where it came from. Because one thought could be from one person, and another thought, they could have picked that up from somebody else and picked that up from somebody else. Yep. So that is one huge tool, is knowing that a lot of times when you're really, really aware, that you're so aware and it's actually not even yours in the first place.
And the example you just gave of putting it all in a balloon and blowing it up, I think is a great visual. I am a very visual person, so I totally could see you, like you were standing in front of me blowing up that balloon. And I love that idea and that suggestion for kids as well, who, that if they are a visual thinker, to give them that visual is what a cool idea that is. I'm gonna have to play with that. I know some kids who are extremely intelligent and very aware of everybody around them, and these kind of conversations, what would it take for way more of these kind of conversations to take place in the world and in the schools and everything, to give teachers some different, and parents some different tools, some different things that can all contribute to the kids.
Yeah. And another thing too is like, even if you're thinking of like a cloud, and like sometimes they move super fast, like in a storm, and sometimes they're slow, but like even if you're like all of that stuff that you're aware of when those walls are closing in, like place it on a cloud and allow the cloud just to float away. And you can even be like, oh, it's like in a storm, like it's got to go really fast. Or it can be like you're laying there on the grass looking up at the sky. And you know how you always, like as a kid, like watch the clouds, or even I still love doing it and being like making shapes and forms out of them. Yeah, like take all that stuff and like look at a cloud and allow it to shift and change and form and allow it to like just pass on by.
And, you know, I think that it's such a great thing for all of us to remember. Just because you're aware of it and you might have, does not mean it's yours. It does not mean you have to do anything with it. You don't have to solve, you know, whatever it is you're aware of. You don't have to do anything with it at all. And so using the examples that Trina gave us of, you know, sending it away on a cloud or putting it in a balloon and popping it, those are some great tips to be like, oh, right, yeah. And I know for me, when I work really hard, and I'm using like air quotes right now, I work really hard and something isn't changing, to ask that question, oh, is this even mine? And it's like, oh, well, no wonder it's not changing. It's not mine, but somewhere like you talked about earlier, I bought that it was mine, and I made it really solid and true and real in my world. And then I couldn't change it. It was
exactly.
Oh, and just asking that question, and you get this, like, again, that space of ease kind of comes over your body, like, oh, it isn't mine. Okay, and off it goes.
Well, and just like we're talking today about being able to engage with like the energetically aware child, adult, and or highly sensitive, it really is, because you don't, like, we ourselves are so aware that we don't even know that we're aware, and then you multiply that times like probably 1,000 of how much they're aware, and there's no filters to filter out like, oh, is this like coming from me or somebody else? Like, to them it's just like all one. It's kind of like what I always talk about, like at the holidays, and if you go into like a mall and you're shopping, you have all the lights going and the music playing, and you have the glare off the floor, and you have all the textures of the clothes, and you have people's cell phones going off. Like, that's only a few of the sounds that you're hearing, and like all that sensory information. It's like complete overload, and not having like a remote to turn it off. And so like when you don't have those filters, that's what occurs. And that's why the tools that I was sharing, which sound really simple, but they actually change a lot. Like when you can actually expand that zone of awareness, push down those barriers, expand out the zone, be more space, ask a question, is this mine? Or what am I aware of? What do I know about this? That changes so much. That changes a lot.
It really, really does. And the zone of awareness, I hear a lot of people talking about it who are horse people as well. And I've heard some really funny stories about the horse. They demand that you stay present and aware when you're riding them. And when you're not, they will tell you in one way or the other. So to have you talk about it, you know, that to have that same thing with people is that's such an amazing thing to have.
Yeah, one of my friends who works with horses, and she's works some with like special needs. Well, actually, a lot of them they don't even have a label. They just are these kids who have maybe a little few challenges. But like it's what you're talking about, that zone of awareness, and the horses demand you to stay present. Like, so the horses, she couldn't get the kids to get them to go. So she had the kids imagine putting a bubble around them and the horse, and then expanding out that bubble and moving that bubble forward where that horse was supposed to go. And then the horse would just go and take off with no words, no nothing. It was just like, whoop, here you go.
That's neat. That is a really neat trick. Yeah. Well, we just have a few minutes left, and I can't believe how fast this hour has gone by. What other, closing tidbits can you give for anybody listening.
The other tidbit I would give is realize when you're communicating, like we already talked about, it really is energetically and it's really beyond the words. And so a lot of times it's thinking in pictures, like a movie reel in your head. Like how often does somebody says something to you and you get that picture in your head? So like when you're communicating with somebody and you have to go and you don't have the words to be able to do it, or somebody who's really energetically aware, you can actually communicate in pictures. Like for instance, like I was talking about struggling to get out of the house or having your daily routine and the kids are tantruming. Like what if you gave them a picture early in the morning of like, okay, you got to get up, you're going to get dressed, you're going to have your breakfast, you're going to brush your teeth, you're going to grab your backpack, and you're going to go out the door. And like put it all together like super fast and almost like a little movie reel, and it helps. Like just like the other day, I was working with a young man that I work with autism, and we were doing a lesson. And I know it's time to go, but what I did, what came up was a picture in his head, my head, and I gave it to him, and we both started laughing beyond the words. We were just laughing.
Thank you, Trina, so much for being on today. It was such a pleasure playing with you.
Thank you for having me so much. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Well, you guys, reach out to Trina if you have any questions. TrinaRice.com. You can reach me at creatingyumminess.com and access Betsy at Gmail. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.
Have an awesome week. Thank you.